And there's a great word picture that comes in there. She talks about the God of the gaps. Kind of like this. I went and I pilfered from the kids. There are children now in youth church crying because their coloring book disappeared. Little do they know it's here. But, the way she looks at it is if you take a picture that you can see, I guess this is Queen Esther here. We understand her, and where we understand her, we've got her colored in. But in the things we don't understand, well, then we go for a default crayon, the blue crayon, she calls it. And so anything we don't understand, we color it in blue. But then life goes on, we get a natural explanation, and we don't need the blue crayon anymore. We have to scrape it off and then put in the real color or the real explanation as she goes on. And so the whole idea of us slowly removing the blue crayon from people's thinking. But all in all, this is where a lot of rational arguments break down, is not as they go along, it's in the original premise. And that's where we go back. Anybody know the history of crayons? Pretty interesting stuff, how this works. Back in the early 1900s, around the turn of the century there, Edwin Binney was famous for making paint. As a matter of fact, you know how barns are always red, or they have been traditionally? It's because of him. He made a red pigment paint that was an industrial strength, and everybody painted their barns red with this. But he just wasn't into barns. He was into all kinds of stuff, and eventually he got into this idea. Well, one thing, he won an award, or his company did, for making the first dustless chalk. So teachers all over the world herald Edwin Binney. So he was experimenting, and he was trying to find another way to use his pigments in a thing. And he came up with this idea, working with his wife Alice in 1902, is to take pigment and mix it with paraffin wax. And so they did this, and how it works, they take the wax, to this day, take the wax, heat it to 105 degrees, mix in the pigment, get the stuff all stirred together, then shoot it into a matrix of cylindrical molds, and then cover it in 55-degree water, and it cools down, and voila, then you basically end up with a crayon. And then in 3 to 9 minutes, you have this batch of crayons. So that's how, and of course, well then how do you get different colors? You change the pigment, and that's what, but basically pigment and wax. So here's where this comes in, is that as far as her argument, she makes the assumption that God is the blue pigment in the crayon. Well, in fact, if we tweak that a bit, biblically, we actually come up with a better explanation of God. God, in fact, is not the blue pigment in the crayon. In fact, he's not the pigment at all. He's the wax. He's the colorless wax that holds it all together. So no matter what crayon has to get used in your coloring book of explanations, God is the thing that holds it together. The pigment may change, but the wax never changes. Well, would the Bible agree? Well, I think if they used that crayon analogy in the Bible, it probably would have been Colossians 1:17. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is relevant as paraffin wax, that even though you don't see the wax, he's the thing holding it all together. He's the reason behind the reason. It just makes him even bigger. Romans 1:20, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen. The paraffin wax was seen. It was evident anyway. Being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse, because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God. Nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts. You know what? I don't care how good our argument is in anything. If you're starting from the wrong premise, it doesn't matter. You're going to go very gracefully in the wrong direction. And that's what we're talking about here. They became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. To deem something as irrelevant because you just don't see the relevance is real dangerous and foolish ground. It's no place to start, especially when we're talking about the creator of everything.